Okay, so I'm going to be referring to my notes a little bit, so bear with. Um, First of all, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for your patience. We had a little bit of tech difficulties, and also for taking time out of your day to join us today. Thank you if you're watching the replay. Um, I promise, this is going to be fascinating, really interesting, and very useful information with some very great stories. So, what I want to say up front, just a little housekeeping, is if you have any questions, that's great. Put them in the chat. We're going to get to them at the end so we can cover everything. And I'm going to introduce myself really briefly, and then I'm going to introduce our esteemed guest, Keith Robinson. So, my name is Jody Teich. I'm a certified health coach for people and pets. My passion is cutting edge tools, supplements, protocols that really move the needle for people's health. And that's why Keith came into my world. And I learned about this beautiful natural gas in the body called nitric oxide and what it can do when we activate the production of more of it. So, without any further ado, let me introduce Keith to you. Keith has been involved in the health space for 17 years. He's a trained B-Pro operator, so that's for doing cardiovascular screenings, and he's been guiding people successfully on how to help the body reverse all sorts of health challenges for a long time. He has a saying, he tells this to me often, the body can fix pretty much anything when given the correct fuel. So I'd like to warmly welcome Keith Robinson to our meeting today. Welcome, Keith.
Thanks, Jody. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for arranging this, because the more people that can be helped, the better.
Totally agree. I'm super excited that people learn this information today. So we're going to dive right in because everybody's time is valuable. I guess the best place to start, Keith, is to explain to listeners what is nitric oxide in the body, what does it do, and why is it so important?
Well, it's classed as a molecule. We make it inside our endothelial cells, which is the lining of the veins and the arteries. The 1998 Nobel Prize for Medicine actually proved that it was a signaling molecule in the cardiovascular system. They call it the miracle molecule because of all the benefits of nitric oxide in the body. So not only does it help the body to keep the arterial system clean, elastic, and free flowing, but it can also be used in the body as a hormone, a neurotransmitter, an intercellular messenger. So the entire messaging system can improve with adequate nitric oxide production. And for diabetics, if you have adequate nitric oxide production, your liver can engineer cells to excrete insulin to give your body another form of natural insulin to help balance sugars while you're resetting your body.
Oh my God. I get very excited about this stuff. So it's really like a miracle substance. Um so we know that when you're sending more oxygen to all cells in the body, all organ systems in the body, that stimulates faster, better healing everywhere, top to bottom.
Yes.
Tell everyone participating today just kind of a basic idea of the types of things you mentioned, diabetics, other types of things that this can help. We'll go deeper in a moment, but just give people an idea of the breadth of different things that this can help.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone that would not benefit from better oxygenated blood supply. But I think another secret to the whole thing is a lot of nutrition is missing from the food we consume today. Like if you ate a plate of salad 50 years ago and you want the same level of nutrition today, you'd be very busy because you'd have to sit down and eat 47 plates of salad. So you have to also give the body the missing nutrition so at a cellular level it can repair, and that the increased oxygenated blood supply is going to carry that nutrition. But really, every health challenge is an imbalance in the body. So if you can get the body back into balance, it will deal with the health challenges. Because I put everything into the one bracket, imbalance in the body. There is a tendency to put a label on issues simply because there's a whole host of medicines attached to that label. But it's
Yeah.
really all the same thing.
Exactly, exactly. An imbalance is an imbalance. And if you're sending oxygen to heal the cells everywhere, it's going to heal what the body needs to most first, and then on and on.
Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Okay, so you're going to tell a bunch of stories that are real people's real experiences with real illnesses. And that to me is the most powerful. Um, but what I think makes sense to frame those stories, because you're going to be referring to this a lot, is to briefly tell everyone what this V3 protocol is that you will be mentioning. What does it consist of?
Yeah, the Vital 3 protocol is three distinct elements, but each of equal importance. So it's all very fine if you can increase oxygenated blood supply and you can restore that blood flow. But I often say to people, there's no point in circulating Big Macs. You must circulate decent nutrition. So to fill the gap between the level of nutrition that's in our food, which is brutally low, and the level of nutrition the body actually requires to go into repair mode, we have two other pieces of the puzzle. One of them is live raw berries. We call that Mystify here in Europe. It's called Mystica in the US. And this is there to help with inflammation. It's a natural anti-inflammatory. It's a natural pain suppressant. It's antiviral. It's antifungal. And it's a massive amount of antioxidants. And as we know, antioxidants neutralize free radicals. And at 30 mils twice a day, it's actually proven to reduce free radical damage by 43% in 3 weeks.
Wow.
So you'll be basically slowing down the aging process by the same amount because free radicals speed up aging. So it's there to supply massive nutrition. And then the third part of the Vital 3 is live raw greens. We call that Phytolife here in Europe. It's called liquid chlorophyll in the US. But greens are actually required in the body to detox your organs, cleanse your blood, correct your pH, and provide nutrition. But most people are not getting any greens in their diet. And therefore, those jobs are not happening. And unfortunately, also 9 people out of 10 are acidic instead of being slightly alkaline. When you are acidic, you actually invite acid-based health challenges like chronic pain, arthritis, osteoporosis, acid reflux, and cancer. So if you want to keep those things away from you, then you correct your pH and bring yourself slightly alkaline. So that's why it's a Vital 3 protocol, because you're giving the body what it needs at a cellular level nutrition-wise, plus you're making sure that the vascular system is cleaning itself and transporting that everywhere.
Perfect, perfect. And you did talk about the proarginine, the actual
Yes.
nitric oxide activator. Perfect. Okay, great. So stories. I'm really excited
Um,
for people to hear some of these stories, like some of the maybe
and
more common
which,
ones to start. Maybe heart
yeah,
disease is a big
heart
common
disease
one.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I started on this journey, of course, I was very skeptical. And when somebody said to me, you know that it's now possible to reverse heart disease, I of course was interested, but I had to prove it to myself because, different personalities need the proof more than others. So I needed the proof. So what I did was I had my cardiovascular system analyzed. I was 46 at the time. My cardiovascular system showed up to be that of a 40-year-old. I started to use the V3 protocol. I went up to actually 4 sachets a day of Proarginine Plus because I wanted to really see what was possible. And 90 days later, my cardiovascular age actually dropped down to 22.
What?
And then 2 months later, I had it checked again, and my vascular age came down to a teenager. So that was all the proof I needed to know that I was on the right track. It was worth putting time into it, and that really people needed to know this information. And then I started to do a lot of cardiovascular screening with a device called a B-Pro that I got trained on. And this measures the vascular system and shows the improvement that can be made. So you could have somebody that's in their 30s but their cardiovascular age could be in their 60s or 70s because they are building up plaque a lot faster than somebody else. They have inhibitors to nitric oxide production. But I remember doing a vascular screening. I was asked to meet up with a guy who had just actually passed out in the gym 2 days previously, completely blacked out. And he had 3 days of testing in one of the private hospitals in Dublin. And they weren't altogether sure why he passed out, but they were offering him a triple bypass. And anyway, I was asked to meet him, and I did a cardiovascular screening with the BPRO, and that actually did show excessive stiffness in the arteries. So you're going to get a flexibility figure for the arteries. So if the more plaque that's in the arteries, the less flexibility is there, the stiffer they're going to be. So I could see that his arterial stiffness was way above his age. And I said there was a problem developing there, but he had an opportunity to correct it because obviously increasing nitric oxide production is going to melt the plaque. So they had told him he needed a triple bypass, but he said, I'd like to try. He says, you were after telling me in 10 minutes what it took them 3 days of tests to tell me. And he says, you have a solution for my problem, but he says, they're offering to have my chest cranked open and have a triple bypass. So he decided to follow the V3 protocol for 3 months, and he went up to 4 sachets a day for the 3 months. When he went back in for a pre-op examination, he did another scan that morning in the lower part of the hospital before he went up to the cardiologist. And while he was in with the cardiologist, who was figuring that he had this sale of a triple bypass, the tech guy came up with his today's scan, and he handed it to the cardiologist, who put it into the computer and looked at it. He says, no, that's not his. So he said, go and check that again. You've given me the wrong one. So he went down and checked and came back up, and he says, no, that is the right one. And the two of them had a stand-up row in the office saying whether it was or it wasn't. But he was delighted to know that what he had done had actually solved his problem, that he no longer required a bypass.
Wow.
So that's the kind of power of doing this. And we were out in Nigeria in 2018. We were helping people there, and there was a lady who was bedridden for 5 years with no feeling on one side of her body from a stroke. And every morning, the son or daughter had to go in and help her sit up on the bed, and then at night they had to lie her down. And that was her life for 5 years. But her daughter got hold of the V3 before we went over, and she'd started to give her the V3. And the daughter asked, could she speak at one of the events we were doing? And we didn't know what she was going to say, but she began to tell us that she'd been giving her mother the V3 protocol for 5 weeks because of the stroke and all the rest. And she says, I went into my mother this morning to sit her up. And she says she was already sitting at the side of the bed. And she says, I asked her, who got you up? She says, I got myself up because I'm getting back the feeling in the dead side of my body.
Oh
So what had happened was the clot that was lodged in her brain, by making more nitric oxide, it started to melt the clot.
wow. Wow, wow, wow.
So,
Okay.
there's
pretty heavy
loads of,
stuff.
it is. And I've seen tons of people work their way off their medications, because when you have excessive stiffness in the arteries, and when the plaque builds up and you have the blood flow narrowed down to a third of what it should be, the body starts asking the heart to rise in pressure to compensate.
Yeah.
So it could be the liver, it could be the kidneys. They're screaming, looking for extra blood supply because it's been diminished. And the heart has gone up to a certain pressure to try and get the blood flow to the organs that are looking for it. But then they're put on medication, which doesn't actually solve the problem. It only instructs the heart to go back down on pressure. So what you're doing is you're then starving back down the organs to the blood supply it was at before it started to scream looking for extra. So really, the blood pressure medication, in my opinion, is creating a time bomb waiting to go off later because the problem has not been addressed.
Yeah.
And the original problem was a lack of nitric oxide production, because as soon as you increase nitric oxide production, you're melting the plaque, it's a vasodilator, it restores the blood flow, and the body stops asking the heart to rise in pressure. So
Yeah.
it's really, really fabulous. And I got a phone call from a surgeon in one of the private hospitals one day asking me to help him get his brother off medications. And we achieved that in 6 weeks.
Fantastic. Also, what I am hearing and what you have reported to me is when it comes to blood pressure normalization, that happens pretty quickly once they increase nitric oxide production in the body.
It can. What you need to find is the level.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, for example, somebody starts off on one sachet a day and they mightn't be getting any reaction. So then the try two, because there is blockers to nitric oxide production in the body, several of them. One of them is called ADMA, another one is called myeloperoxidase. And what happens is they inhibit nitric oxide production. So if you have a natural inhibitor that's blocking it, you have to override that and you have to go up with your levels of arginine to make sure you have disrupted the blocker to make sure that you're now making enough nitric oxide. So if somebody is not getting a reaction on one sachet, they can move to two. If they're not getting a reaction on two, they can move to three. At some point, you will know the difference because the blood flow starts to return to areas that it was missing. You can have a bit of pressure in the head because the blood flow to the brain gets back up to the brain that was missing and it feels different until you're used to the proper flow again. You can get tingling in the extremities that were previously cold. So if you reach the level where you're making a difference, well then repair is happening. And if
Yeah.
you want that repair to happen faster, you go higher.
Now, you said the two blockers that are
Yes.
naturally in the body. Why does the body want to block the production of nitric
It's not
oxide?
it's not that it wants to. It's just that I believe one of them, the ADMA, is the hereditary part of cardiovascular disease. So if your parents had a high level, you will have a high level, and that's going to inhibit nitric oxide production naturally, and therefore this is why you have people dying younger of cardiovascular issues because that inhibitor was there and nothing was done about it. The symptoms were hidden because they were on blood pressure medication and cholesterol medication from a young age because they're hiding that symptom.
Okay.
But there was a study done in the University of Hamburg Hospital in Germany where it was over 25 years and it was 75 healthcare professionals, and they were trying to find the cause of cardiovascular disease. And Professor Rainer Berger, who was one of the physicians who was involved in that study, I was at an event where he spoke and he told us all about this. And he said that the reason for heart disease is that if you don't get your arginine levels over your ADMA levels by 160 to 1, you will have cardiovascular disease.
Interesting. Very
And
interesting.
that's what arginine plus helps to do, is to get your arginine levels over your ADMA levels. But if you have a high level of ADMA and you only take one sachet a day, you may not have any impact.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who has a low level of ADMA and they take one sachet, they might get a great benefit in one sachet. So you have to find your level.
Your sweet spot. But I think it's
Yeah.
really important for people to understand what they may be looking for to as they're entering their sweet spot, so to speak. So
Yes.
explain some of that a little bit.
So oftentimes you would have somebody start on the products and whatever once they get to that sweet spot, it could be one sachet, two sachets, three sachets, they're starting to get a headache. They think they have a headache. They don't have a headache. They have a returning of blood flow back up to the brain that was gone. If you had, let's say you had a weak disc in your back, you could that could feel sore for a day or two while the blood flow got back to that area. Anywhere there's a weakness or a lack of blood flow, you will feel it different while it restores to the way it should have been.
Okay, so that's a signal for
And,
people
and
to
blood pressure can start to come back down again.
okay.
Because once the blood flow starts getting to where it was required, it
Mhm.
stops asking the heart to rise in pressure and everything gets back into homeostasis.
Mhm. Um, you had mentioned diabetes in the beginning of this conversation,
Yeah.
and I know that you have many, many, many stories over 17 years of people with diabetes too, especially because that is so prevalent today.
Yes.
Can you tell us one so people can have an idea of a real instance, a real person?
Yes, a lot of people who are diabetic have cardiovascular issues, including 2/3 of diabetics actually die from cardiovascular disease. So they're at a disadvantage immediately. An awful lot of people are having a diet which is too high in sugars, and it's not altogether their fault because there's all these hidden sugars within the food, and they may be misinformed with regards to what's okay to eat and what's not okay to eat. And here's something that may help people as well. You know, the way people who are watching uh, sugars, and instead of having, we'll say, a Coke, they'll have a Diet Coke, and they think they're doing the right thing. But what's not explained is the sweetener that is in the diet foods is about 600 times sweeter than sugar. But when you drink it, your receptors think there's sugar coming and start to release insulin to counteract the sugar that's not there, and that's also causing mayhem in the system. Uh, and I've seen lots of diabetics go on the V3 and massively reduce their medications. Um, I showed you the picture of the diabetic leg ulcer of the lady in Nigeria who was told her leg needed to be amputated because of a diabetic leg ulcer. Now it was bad. But instead of having her leg amputated, she went on to the V3 and she repaired the entire wound. There was fresh skin over the entire wound within 9 weeks from an open sore that was that big around between the front and the back. Um, but that's the only reason that sore was there was because there was no circulation to get nutrition down there to heal it.
Mm,
Even within the first week, you can see changes in the edges around the sore because the body is starting to work on it.
hmm.
And as I often say to people, that's just an outward and visible sign of the body working on problems, but it is working on problems throughout the whole body at the same time. That's and the body will prioritize what it
Exactly.
needs to work on first.
It's
And
ingenious.
you might be watching one particular thing, but the body's working on something else. And unless you're paying good attention to what's going on and have a good list of your situation and look at it every week, you might not notice the things that the body is actually picking first.
Yeah, the ingenious part of our incredible bodies is that it will work on the thing that is most detrimental to its
Important.
survival, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to clear up
And
things that are most important to it and surviving
th-
first.
there was a there's a great there's a great video on YouTube of a guy who is explaining his story. Excuse me, his story with the V3 and his diabetes and blood pressure. And he said he was on something like 47 prescriptions a day. And it took him the bones of an hour to get out of bed and get started in the morning. He was that lethargic and in trouble. But the end of his testimony said that he was down to just one shot of Langton a day instead of the 40 something prescriptions. So
Wow.
he turned that around completely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, I think what we're going to do is the doctor who created this particular formulation and for close to 40 years has been working with his patients and lecturing around the world about how using these pieces of the formulation that he created is doing all of these beautiful things, rolling back heart disease, getting people off dialysis, et cetera, and so forth. His name is Dr. Joseph Prendergast. Um, God rest his soul. Apparently, he passed away in a car accident a couple of years ago, but he left an amazing, beautiful legacy. And I have a piece of an interview that he did that talks about it, focuses on diabetes and kidney disease, but I want to share it with all of you now so you can just get a sense and see the person, hear the person, the doctor behind all of this. So bear with me. We are going to go to the videotape.
To have you here today. I appreciate you taking the time. Tell us a little bit about the dramatic effect through both diabetes and moving into kidney failure, renal disease, preventing dialysis, even your remarkable success in having some people come off of dialysis and using Pro-Arginine Plus and the other products.
Well, this has been one of the major things that I was doing, and I never understood it. Back in the period in 1990 to 1996, we were seeing a lot of people who were well into their diabetes, well into their kidney failure, and we were being involved with them. And what you have to realize is the kidney is nothing more than a ball of little tiny microscopic vessels. That's all. It's in a nice carrying case, if you will. And it processes 25% of all your blood flow every minute. And so that's what it's doing, cleaning house. This is really important. But if you have diabetes, these small vessels, the hallmark of diabetes, get very small, they get very narrow, and they begin having big round scars around it, and it's going down, 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 and be really small. Now, the people who are trained in nephrology, which is kidney specialty, have had, like I believed, you can't change a scar. It can't be something different. And you have something like in the arteries, when it's bad, it'll never be good again. Well, of course, we said 3 or 4 times already today, that's not true. You can reverse it. And I have the #1 cardiologist in all of Europe said, no, you can't get it. And I believe the same thing. If you can do it with the big arteries, why not the small? You do it with the D and you do it with the arginine. That's simple. Now, having said that, in kidney failure, there's a lot of difficulty going back and forth, and you have to focus on a lot of other things, watch the magnesium, the potassium, because the clearance mechanisms are not normal. But one of the proudest days of my life was last Monday, when a patient whom I've known for 25 years and shepherded through all kinds of things, he had type 1 diabetes since about age 4, and he's now about 71, and he got in, had something happen in an accident, and all of a sudden his arteries in the legs were injured, and they closed up, and he had to have both arteries replaced. I think it was an auto accident. And what they do in replacing now, they take the veins out. Veins are the carriers of all the old blood back up to the heart, so they can have other ones that'll work. So they had them taken out, and what you're supposed to do is take them out, reverse them, put them back in where the arteries were. They've got the lining for blood flow and everything else, and they work beautifully. But Stanford put them in backwards. They had valves. They wouldn't let the blood flow. His legs were dying in about 35 minutes after the operation. They couldn't figure out what went wrong. It was weeks before they found out their mistake. And by that time, his creatinine was 1 when he went in, was 5. 5 in universal, talking to nephrologists saying, you cannot return it. It cannot be normal again. You have to take the kidneys out, give him new ones, and dialysis until you need to do this. I've never done that. And this guy was a real test. So it happened that as a really good young nephrologist at Stanford says, we'll get you off dialysis, but we got to do it for now. You got too much junk floating around. And he looked at him and he said, you really mean that? He said, yeah, I do. How long? He said, about 6 weeks. Oh, my word. So he toddles in the other day, and I say, how's your creatinine? I know you had it measured last Friday. He says, it's 3. And he said, I have had my last dialysis. He's got on my program to get everything in play from his standpoint. It'll be really good, so you don't have to be on dialysis anymore. But what I see is what this nephrologist told me, is he said, we need the 2 of us. You understand how to use the arginine and the D. I understand how to do all the other little funny things we do. But between us, we're taking people off dialysis.
Okay, let me stop sharing. So that's pretty powerful. And that's just one lane.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to sort of, this is sort of a perfect segue because you had told me that in Dr. Joe's clinic, everybody was on the V3 protocol. And when
Yes.
one of his staff members, this young woman, became pregnant, she continued on the V3 throughout her pregnancy. And something pretty extraordinary happened. Tell everybody what happened.
Yeah, Dr. Joe told us this one time when he was over. I mean, we got great information from him several times when he was over, and he was talking about how safe it was and all the rest. He said so. All of his endocrinology clinic staff were on the V3, and you know the big bottles of water, the 19-liter bottles. So they used to actually put a tub of Paragenine Plus into that big thing and shake it up. So they were going to the cooler then and getting it out of there. But he said that what they realized is that pregnant mums on the V3, their babies develop at 123% of normal, which
Faster.
is really fabulous. I'm talking about the development, the brain development and all the development of a child, even after they're born. It's developing at 123% of normal. And we have had mums who had previous children, and then they were on the V3 for their next child, and we call them V3 babies. And they can see a difference between that child and the previous children. And I was telling you about a friend of mine's daughter who ended up having preeclampsia during her pregnancy. And so he got her to go on the V3, and the preeclampsia sorted out. Her blood pressure came back down to normal. And then she stopped it, and then her preeclampsia came back. And then she went back on the V3, and everything sorted. And she stayed on it for the rest of the pregnancy. But when a baby is born, they do an AGFAR test. Isn't that what you call it?
It's APGAR score.
APGAR.
Those
APGAR
five
score. So
areas.
that's a
Yeah.
That's a 10 out. They score them out of 10 on 30 tests. And that baby was born prematurely, but it was the first baby in the history of the hospital to get a 10 out of 10 on all 30 tests.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah.
So this is
So
not
that,
just for people who are older like us, and have health issues that we're dealing with. This could be good for pretty much anyone, because you've told me stories of children with ADHD, children on the spectrum.
yes,
Tell one of
yes.
those, because I think that's also, something that a lot of parents, I see it when I'm, at the wellness center at People's. I see it, parents coming in all the time talking about their children on the spectrum and looking for help.
Yeah, there was one child in Donegal. I wasn't dealing with it myself, but I actually have the written testimony from the parents. And they had a child that had learning difficulties and was getting 2 or 3 spellings right out of 30 and needed a special needs assistant and all that goes with it. So the parents got the V3 to give to the child. And shortly after that, several months later, maybe 6 months later, that child no longer needed a special needs assistant and was getting 28 or 29 spellings right out of 30. So whatever happened, there was either an improvement in blood flow somewhere, or the issue that was causing it. Sometimes it's a buildup of metals in the system from all the injections that the kids are getting. And in order to get bad out, you have to put good in. So plenty of good in can push out bad, and then there's a certain amount of cleaning that goes on. But when you have great oxygenated blood supply and when you have fabulous nutrition, the body can generally work on things like that on the quiet. So that was a case where that there was a benefit. There was a lady, she had 3 kids with autism, and she did the microbiome gut purify on them. And she said she could see a marked improvement on those kids by resetting the gut microbiome.
Yeah, well, it all
So
starts there. It all starts there. And I also find it really helpful personally, um, because, while many of us may eat well, no one's perfect. We're human, and
yeah,
everyone has some holes in their nutrition, right? So I like being able to know that for me, with the berries, the Mystica, and with the chlorophyll, that it's filling up any holes that I may have from not eating perfectly
perfectly.
and giving my body everything it needs to repair, and then having the arginine. I mean, people may not realize there are quite a few nitric oxide activator products on the market.
Yep.
And most of them have beetroot powder, beetroot extract. Maybe one I know of has L-citrulline in it. But unless you take L-arginine as a standalone supplement or something that has it included, but not specifically to do this, you really don't find L-arginine in supplements, and it is the first precursor to the body making more nitric oxide. So I really like that ProArginine has L-arginine, L-citrulline, the beetroot powder, as well as some other things.
Vitamin D.
Yeah, so I know that my body is being stimulated to do exactly what I want it to do. So go ahead.
An interesting point there while Dr. Joe was on the screen reminded me, he told us that 85% of his patients were diabetic. And as you know, 2/3 of diabetics die from cardiovascular issues. And he was giving the precursor to ProArginine Plus. In other words, he made up the formulation of ProArginine Plus and handed it then to Synergy Worldwide for them to actually put it all together. But for a 20-year period with 19,000 patients, he had no patient die from heart attack or stroke. And he put 3 cardiologists out of business in his area.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's impressive. You had mentioned before a really important fact about vaccines and heavy metals in the body. And we know this is fact, this is science, that vaccines contain aluminum as well as other metals.
Yep.
And that it is an absolute problem and one of the fallouts of vaccinations. And I know there are a lot of people out there who have been vaccinated against COVID. And some may be happy they did it. Some may regret doing it. Some may not have feelings either way. But the bottom line is, if there is a way to help clean the body, that's something that could be very interesting. And one of the fallouts that we're seeing, this is a two-parter, Keith. One of the fallouts that we're seeing with this COVID vaccine are the predisposition to blood clots.
Yes.
So I know you have stories about blood clots that I thought were really, wild. So
Yeah.
kind of maybe share that. And because it doesn't only apply to vaccination, people can be
Yes.
concerned about blood clots all the time. There are plenty of people on blood thinners.
Yes, blood clots would be a major problem if they're stuck in the wrong place. But I remember a case of a guy who had a flight, and during that flight, he got a deep vein thrombosis in his leg. So he actually went on the V3, and over a weekend, he cleared his clot.
Wow.
I also have there's a gentleman that I know who received a kidney transplant. And there was about five or six people who did transplants all at the same time. And every one of them were working fine and the creatinine level was dropping nicely, but his wasn't, his was going up. So when he went back into the hospital to see what was wrong, one of the junior doctors was saying, "Oh, unfortunately, because you received a kidney from a deceased person, there is a bigger chance of having a clot. So we believe you actually have a clot, and that's where the problem is." So he said, the senior doctor is away for a long weekend. Can you come back in on Tuesday? So I think this was on a Thursday or a Friday. So over the long weekend, he went up to 6 sachets of Progenine plus a day, plus the plenty of Mystify and Fight to Life. And he actually melted his own clot himself. He cleared the problem. So by the time he went back in, there was no clot and his creatinine was coming down.
This is the epitome of self-empowerment when it comes to taking charge of our own health. And that
Yes.
is a huge passion of mine. And one of the reasons why I do what I do as a health coach, to empower people and pet parents to learn these things so that they know what to do. Not that doctors and veterinarians, we don't need them. We do. They provide a very important service, and they're experts in their lanes. And when we know more, we can not only do more to help ourselves and our pets, but we can also not have to always be running to the vet. We can know the difference of when we should be running to the vet and not, or running to the doctor and not. And that actually brings us into the pet space. There may be some people on or listening in the replay who are also interested in how they can help their pets live longer, more vibrant lives. And you actually, I mean, I know that increasing nitric oxide in dogs, horses, especially, can help with a lot of things. You actually have a couple of stories of that. So I'd love for you to share those 2 stories that you shared with me.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine. He's Norwegian, lives in Spain now. His name is Mods, and he actually reversed his multiple sclerosis using these products. But he was telling me about a friend of his in Norway that had a racehorse, and that racehorse had to be put out to stud because he was no longer valid for racing. He wasn't up to racing anymore. So they decided they would try put some Progenine into his drinking water, 1 sachet a day. And that horse went back racing.
Wow. Wow.
And there's friends of mine in Norway called Ingrid and Stein, and they had a dog that was becoming to the point where he could no longer go outside himself to go to the toilet. I don't know whether it was him or her, but anyway, they had to lift the dog out to do the business and then lift the dog back in again. And so the quality of life wasn't great. So they decided, let's try some Progenine in his water. And glory be to God, the dog was back going in and out himself, and there was an extra year of life, of quality of life, by doing that.
That's fantastic. So severe osteoarthritis, it sounds like.
It was some form of arthritis, I'm guessing, that was causing the dog not to be able to walk out in peace and without pain.
Yeah. Between that hugely common issue in senior pets and cognitive decline, another big issue that especially dog parents are worried about, and others, are living through, dealing with. So this could be really interesting.
Which are humans. Humans, the same thing. I mean, look at the amount of Alzheimer's and dementia now. We actually have a testimony from a woman whose father had dementia to the point where he could no longer recognize any of the family, and he just sat in the kitchen all day. And the daughter started to give him the V3, and 3 months later, he was back conversing the same as nothing was ever wrong.
No way! Wow!
Yeah.
Wow!
But in my opinion, you know the way you have the myelin around the brain, protecting the brain, messaging can pass through the myelin, but your myelin is made from cholesterol and fats. What is everybody told to do? No fats,
and lower cholesterol.
No cholesterol. So your body is going to make a certain level of cholesterol to make hormones, bile acids, build cells. 87% of every cell in the body is built from cholesterol, but it also has to protect your wiring, protect your brain. Now, supposing, for example, you need this level of cholesterol to do all those jobs. Now, let's say the body needs to repair the myelin, and it's going to make extra to do that. But the medication doesn't allow the extra. So now you don't have enough cholesterol to repair the myelin. What's going to happen? Cognitive function is going to go down to Swanee. So I think Also, when I was doing cardiovascular screenings, when you had an excessive stiffness in the arteries, the heart pumps blood, the arteries try and flex, but because they've lost their flexibility, you get tiny cracks and tears in the arterial system.
Mm-hmm.
What's the body's response? Instruct the liver to make extra cholesterol to go in and seal the cracks and tears.
Right.
So raised cholesterol was not the original problem. The original problem was a lack of nitric oxide production that allowed the plaque to build up, that caused the stiffness, that caused the cracks and tears, that caused the body to make more cholesterol to stop you from bleeding out. So every time you see a fire, there's generally a fire brigade. Does it make sense to blame the fire brigade for the fire?
Of course not.
Well, everyone's blaming cholesterol for causing the cardiovascular disease, but it's not.
Yeah, and throwing statins in the mix, which has another whole host of side effects.
And what I found is when you get the flexibility back into the arteries, cholesterol drops back to normal.
So interesting. So interesting. Keith, this has been amazing. What I want to put out there, because I want to respect everyone's time and we're coming up on the hour, is, the most important thing when it comes to really any supplements is knowing your own individual situation and, the being responsible. So what I want to put out there is if there are any questions, I don't see questions in the chat. So if there are any questions about increasing nitric oxide in the body and is it right for you, reach out. I'm going to put a link in the chat right now where you can set up a call with me. It's free of charge, and you can tell me your individual situation, and I can help guide you. And anything I don't know, Keith is here, and he can help guide you as well. So I encourage you to do that. The link is going up right now. There it is. I want to thank you, Keith, for making time today to come here with me and share this beautiful information, this powerful information about how we can take control of our health and help ourselves get well. So thank you so much.
If we can help one more person as a result of this call, well, then it was worthwhile.
Absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. And I thank all of you for joining, whether you're here live or whether you're watching on the replay up on my YouTube. You'll be getting, I'll be doing a post on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and sending text to my friends with the YouTube link in case you didn't make the live and want to watch there. So thank you everyone for attending.